Hey guys, it's Eric, owner of Farpoint Farms here in the mountains, North Carolina. Tonight I wanted to make a little bit of a different video. I wanted to talk about Radio Shack. As we all know, Radio Shack's pretty well gone extinct. There's about 70 stores left in the United States. I'm lucky enough to have two within driving distance of the house. They are both about an hour away, but hey, at least they're there. But Radio Shack, it's just a part of my life. It defined me when I was a kid, going to the mall with my parents and getting to check out all the cool electronics. Really helped me become what I am today. It helped me, my interest in computers, it helped my interest in electronics, certainly helped my interest in radios, CB radios, ham radios, and the like. And if it hadn't been for Radio Shack and having that in-store exposure to all that cool technology, I doubt I would have come out the same way that I did. So I know a lot of people like to bash Radio Shack, but for me, well, Radio Shack will always have a real nice soft spot in my heart. From that, getting those catalogs every year, and I probably have a dozen of them still to this day. I know I have the last year they produced it, but those Radio Shack catalogs were the stuff dreams were made of back at the house. You could sit there and look at all the latest computer technology, all the miniaturization that was going on in the late 80s and early 90s, and just daydream. But of course, as a child, I was mostly introduced to Radio Shack because of the cool toys they had. I mean, who doesn't remember having their first RC car from Radio Shack? That blue Ford 4x4 was one of the first remote control cars I had seen in that picture right there. I can't believe my parents spent that kind of money, to be honest with you. That was a whole lot of money in 1980 dollars. It's a whole lot of money now, to be honest with you. And from there, I picked up some other ones. They got me this really cool Lamborghini Countach, I think that was. That was a really cool one. And although I never had one, a lot of my friends had the Armatrons. Does anybody remember those? Those Armatrons were really cool. Here's a picture of one here. This is one of the later style ones. They even had one that was on a track, as I recall. And this one here is just the original base unit, but very neat stuff to play with. And then I actually had one of these. I picked this up at a yard sale years ago, and that was probably the last Radio Shack car that I had for about 10 years. I actually have a Radio Shack remote control car right now. And then who could forget these? The Archer Space Patrol. This was probably my first introduction to two-way radio. Of course, they had a range of about 100 feet, but I'll tell you what, it felt when you were a kid, being able to contact each other like that was just incredible. And from there, we move on to this, and this is probably what defined my electronics interest. In fact, this next picture coming up here is the exact model that I got for Christmas one year. I'd say that was probably 83 or 84, maybe a little earlier than that. But yeah, the 151 Project, I wore that thing out. In fact, the book fell apart. I used it so much that I was making kits. You could create radios. You had a crystal AM radio in there. You could make circuits. I made an alarm system out of it. Just an incredible thing. And I think to kids today and how they really don't have access to this or the interest, I suppose, but not even having access to learn simple projects like this or complex ones, really. You could go all out with this thing. I feel bad for them. And that was a part of Radio Shack as well. Of course, I got a little bit older, and sometime in 1985, I started to realize just how cool computers were. I mean, these things were just so awesome. And of course, Radio Shack had some of the coolest computers out there. You could go to the store and they'd have them on display. Of course, at my age, I was interested in the Color Computer 3 because they played the games. But as I got older, the Model 3s and the Model 4s became pretty impressive machines. And I ended up owning a Model 4D, which was pretty much top of the line for the TRS line. Take a look at the numbers on that. A 15 megabyte hard drive for just $2,500. Of course, you need to have the controller for it. Here's Isaac Asimov, of all people, plugging the Model 3. Very cool, man. The Model 3 was a great computer. The Model 4 was even better with a monochrome green screen and 80 columns. I loved that computer, and I owned it up until 3 years ago. It's that white one on the top right in this picture. And God, I had tons of software for it. But let's not forget that Radio Shack kind of was innovative in that category as well. Radio Shack introducing one of the very first portable laptops that ran off of AA batteries right here. The Model 100 and eventually the 101 and 102. I've owned one of those over the years as well. It's a great little computer for its era. Could even get online with that thing. It had a built-in modem. Then, of course, they took it a step even farther than that by then introducing this, which is the pocket computer. The great-great-great-grandfather of the modern cellular phone or Apple phone, or these phones that have computers built in. Radio Shack kind of pioneered that. You could throw a computer in your pocket and do a lot of calculations with that thing. Here's another picture of the computer that I owned, a dual disk drive Model 4. Mine was a 4D, which had double density drives, extra storage space, but very similar to this one, same basic layout. And they got rid of that Battleship Gray in that era for a white one, but still a cool computer. And that wraps it up. The computer era, they had their computer centers where they would teach people. These were kind of popular all the way through about 88, 89. I think most of these places closed or were rebranded just back to Radio Shack. IBM kind of took over the market, and they started selling IBM clones for a while too. And of course, what would a story be without talking about Radio Shack's biggest contribution to the world, and that is CB radio. This is the first CB radio I ever got, the TRC 217, a little handheld unit. And from there, I was hooked. I was hooked. And they had some really innovative designs. Now, a lot of this stuff was not built in-house, but they really had some cool stuff here. Here's a base station called the Phone. And it operated just like a phone with a push button. Kind of a unique setup, but they were trying to make CBs an appliance in every household, and to that end, I think they succeeded quite well. Got another picture of the unit I actually own, the TRC 217, my first radio. There it is right there. Still have it, still works. That's a testament to build quality if I've ever seen anything. Not too complex, but it got the job done. And from there we move on to another odd shape. This is a mobile install. I actually owned one of these here. Here it comes right now. It's another phone-based setup, but it's actually for mobile use. And mine was a 40-channel model. Same thing, though. I bought it secondhand and had it for a couple years and moved on with it. But it always got a lot of laughs out of people in the car because it's such a unique design. And this predates cellular phones, so this was kind of a big deal. But Radio Shack just sold the heck out of CB radios. If it wasn't for them, I doubt CB would have been even half as popular as it ended up being. Here's a model with Sideband that came out sometime in the early 90s. And here's a kind of a blurry picture, but this is the TRC 444. This was the second CB radio I ever owned. This is a Radio Shack model. I think it's based off the Midland 500 or 5001, but great radio. Owned it for years. Had it peaked in tune. Probably the only radio I ever had peaked in tune. This was during the peak in the early or mid 90s, and CB was making a huge comeback, and I had this one talking almost every night. The Navajo line of base stations were great base stations, affordable base stations that most folks would get. And of course, there were several units. They had a lot of them that had sideband and different models throughout the years. My first base station was a Radio Shack. Imagine that. And then the last Radio Shack radio I ever bought was this little girl right here, which is the TRC 503, a very compact unit. So Radio Shack really had it nailed. They probably had over 100 models over the years. I bet you even more than that. And from there, I grew older and started getting into my own place and my own house. And you know what? Radio Shack was there for that too. Radio Shack was there when I picked my antenna and needed the grounding wire for it and the ground rods and an antenna rotor for that TV antenna. Yeah, Radio Shack had that too. Nowadays we can go on to Amazon and purchase that stuff, but what happens when you're doing that weekend project and you realize that you bought that rotor and it didn't come with the wire? That's right, that 3-wire antenna rotor wire that we all needed and didn't know we had to have. Well, you could go down to the mall on a Saturday afternoon and pick that up. Now you got to wait a few days, right? Well, let's not forget the Radio Shack also was into ham and scanners as well. In fact, they were big into NASCAR scanners for a long time. They were doing that so people could go to the races and hear what was going on in the pit crews. And they had some really expensive, really high-end trunking computers, computerized scanners that were great. I never owned any Radio Shack scanners at the time, but I remember drooling over them in the store. And how many of these do you think they sold that saved so many people from blowing up their radios because they had one of those that they were able to pick up at Radio Shack? And here's the old antenna I had, an Antenna Craft 190 XLR, one of the best antennas ever built, I believe. And speaking of Radio Shack, there's still some stuff I use. I've got this Radio Shack mixer. I still use it for the pirate radio station we run here, the little micro broadcasting station. I use that as my audio mixing board. So here's something I picked up in the mid-90s, and I'm still using it to this day. And here's something else I still use. This is my Radio Shack automatic antenna rotor, right? I've still got the rotor on the roof and the controller down here. Still operational 20 years later. Good stuff. Anyway, that's it. I might make a part 2 to this. I just wanted to talk about Radio Shack. They've been on my mind. I was thinking about them the other day. I needed something. And, well, there they were. Anyway, that's it. I'm Eric, owner of Farpoint Farms. Hope you enjoyed the video. And if you did, perhaps you will like and subscribe because there'll be more like it. Take care.
something that needs a little fixing on Farpoint Farms. Freedom is mighty sweet.